Every year, millions of tourists stand at the iron gates of Buckingham Palace and look up at the same facade. They watch the guards march. They photograph the balcony. They read every plaque and sign available to the public, and then they walk away believing they have seen the place. They have not seen the place. They have seen the front of it, the part the institution allows them to see. Below the forecourt where they were standing, a medieval river flows through a tunnel of Victorian brick, 3 meters wide, that has been running under the palace for as long as the palace has existed. It was there before the palace. It will be there after the palace. Almost nobody standing above it knows it exists. Somewhere beneath the same address, the exact coordinates are not public, runs a section of the government tunnel network built during the Second World War to allow officials to move between key buildings without surfacing into a city being bombed from above. Former staff members have stated that a route connects this network to the palace. The government has never confirmed this. It has also never denied it. In 1927, a driverless underground railway began operating 70 feet below the streets of London, carrying 4 million letters a day for 76 years. During the First World War, before a single train had run, the completed tunnels were used to hide the collections of the National Portrait Gallery and the Tate from German bombs. Almost no one who worked above ground knew the tunnels existed. One former engineer said that if he told people where he worked, they assumed he worked on the London Underground, because nobody knew the Royal Mail had its own underground railway. And inside the palace itself, in one of its most famous rooms, is a wall of ornate gold-framed mirrors that is not a wall of mirrors. One of them is a door. Behind it is a corridor. The corridor leads to the private apartments of the monarch. And it is why, when the royal family appears before guests who have been waiting in that room, they seem to arrive from nowhere. There is no current official floor plan of Buckingham Palace available to the public. For a building this famous, this visited, this central to the culture of one of the world's major democracies, that absence is not an accident. London is the most layered city in the world. The Romans built on the original settlement. The Saxons built on the Romans. The Normans built on the Saxons. The Victorians buried the rivers and built above them. The wartime government tunneled beneath the Victorians. Every era simply pressed its version of the city down on top of everything that came before. And what you walk on today is not ground. It is centuries of accumulated decisions. Some public, most not. Buckingham Palace sits at the center of this layering, and it is the most documented building in the world to have so little of itself actually on record. This video is about 4 things that exist beneath or inside the palace that do not appear on any document the public has ever been shown. We are going to go through them layer by layer, deepest first. The oldest thing under Buckingham Palace is not a foundation stone or a buried wall. It is a river. The river Tyburn is mentioned in a royal charter dated 951 AD, more than 750 years before the first stone of Buckingham House was laid on its banks. Its name derives from the Old English Tyburn, meaning boundary stream, and for centuries it did exactly that. It marked the edges of estates, fed drinking water to a growing city, and shaped the topography of what would eventually become the most expensive square mile of real estate in Britain. The Tyburn rose in Hampstead, in the hills north of the city, and flowed south through what is now Regent's Park, through Mayfair, through Green Park, and then split near the front gates of the palace. One branch flowed east along the course of what is now St. James's Park Lake, eventually reaching the Thames near Whitehall Stairs, just below Downing Street. The other branch swung south toward Pimlico. This split in the shallow marshy ground where the 2 channels divided created a low-lying island of slightly higher ground further east, an island which medieval monks recognized as stable enough to build on. That island was called Thorney Island. The building they placed on it in 1065 AD was Westminster Abbey. In other words, the same river that flows under the palace also created the island on which the institution that crowns the monarchs who live in the palace was built. The Tyburn connected the 2 most important buildings in the British constitutional order, underground, for over 1,000 years. For most of those years, it flowed openly. Londoners drank from it, fished in it. It was once genuinely reputed for salmon, and used it to define property boundaries across the expanding city. As the city grew and the population's relationship with water became less carefully managed, it became polluted. By the 1860s, when Joseph Bazalgette was rebuilding London's entire drainage system in response to the Great Stink of 1858, the Tyburn was enclosed in a brick tunnel and reclassified as a sewer. It was given the official name King's Scholars Pond Sewer, a reference to the schoolboys of nearby Westminster School who had once used its pond. The name is the only public acknowledgement that the river exists at all. Today, the Tyburn flows through a brick-lined tunnel approximately 3 meters in diameter as it passes beneath the grounds of Buckingham Palace. A tunnel built by hand from millions of individually laid Victorian bricks that the public cannot enter, that no tour includes, and that the palace makes no reference to on any of its official information materials. Urban explorers who have documented their passage through the tunnel describe it as one of London's most extraordinary hidden spaces. One wrote that the experience of standing in a Victorian brick sewer directly beneath the most famous royal address in the world, within a few dozen meters of its ceremonial guards, was something that could not be adequately described to someone who had not done it. He was there. The guards above him never knew. The Tyburn Society, which campaigns to restore London's buried rivers to the surface, has noted that achieving their goal in the area of Buckingham Palace would require the demolition of some of central London's most expensive real estate, including the palace itself. It is, they acknowledge, an unlikely outcome. So the river will continue to do what it has done for over 1,000 years. Flow silently beneath the decisions made above it, unacknowledged, unmapped on any public document, and older than everything that sits on top of it by several centuries. That is the deepest layer. But it is not the only one. By the early 1900s, London's streets were so congested with horse-drawn vehicles and early motor traffic that the post office was losing significant amounts of money to delivery delays. Letters posted in West London were arriving in East London, sorting offices hours late. And in a city where the morning post was expected before breakfast, this was a commercial problem serious enough to require an engineering solution. In 1911, a committee recommended building an underground electric railway, driverless, automated, running entirely below the streets, specifically and solely for the purpose of carrying mail. Construction of the tunnels began in 1914. The tunnels were completed in 1917, on time and under budget. Then the First World War intervened. There was no labor available to install the operating equipment. The trains would have to wait, but the tunnels did not sit idle. In the years before the railway opened, with German bombing threatening London's cultural institutions, the completed tunnels beneath the streets were identified as one of the safest storage locations available in the city. The National Portrait Gallery and the Tate Gallery moved significant portions of their collections into the unfinished railway tunnels for safekeeping. Priceless works of art were stored in the dark, in narrow tunnels 70 feet below the streets of London, waiting for the danger to pass. Almost nobody knew they were there. The Post Office Railway finally opened on the 5th of December, 1927. It was 6.5 miles long, running from Paddington in the west to Whitechapel in the east, serving 8 stations positioned beneath the main sorting offices of central London. Its trains were electric and carried no drivers. They were controlled automatically, running every 7 minutes, 22 hours a day. At its peak, the system carried 4 million letters and parcels every single day, 6 million bags of mail every year. The railway ran for 76 years. Most Londoners had no idea it existed. One engineer who worked on it for decades recalled that whenever he told people where he worked, they assumed he was employed by London Underground. The idea that Royal Mail operated its own entirely separate underground railway, its own tunnels, its own stations, its own rolling stock, seemed implausible to people who had never been told it existed. And most people had never been told, because the railway had no public presence, no stations accessible to the public, and no reason to advertise itself to anyone who was not carrying a mailbag. It closed in May of 2003 when Royal Mail decided that road transport was cheaper. The tunnels were mothballed. In 2017, a section of the old railway beneath Mount Pleasant's sorting office was reopened as a visitor attraction at the new Postal Museum, the first time in its history that any member of the public could ride through the tunnels. The platforms are preserved as they were. There is still a dartboard in one of the underground stations. Workers used it to pass the time during the 7-minute gaps between trains. There are murals on the walls from when the staff converted one of the underground stations into a Santa's grotto for their children at Christmas. For 76 years, 4 million letters a day passed through tunnels beneath central London that the city's residents had no idea existed. The mail arrived on time. The secret held. But the postal railway was not the only thing tunneled beneath the streets around Buckingham Palace during the 20th century. In the autumn of 1939, with war declared and German bombing of London considered inevitable, the British government faced a problem it had been quietly planning for since at least 1936. If the city's key government buildings were bombed, how would the administration of a wartime government continue to function? The answer was to go underground. The construction of a dual-purpose tunnel network beneath Whitehall was documented in records now held at the National Archives. The network, begun in 1939 and completed by 1941, served two functions simultaneously. It provided a route for secure communications cables protected from bomb damage, and it provided walkable underground routes between key government buildings that could be used by personnel in the event of a gas attack or sustained bombing. The network connected several significant locations and at various points joined the existing tube tunnel infrastructure beneath the city. At the northern end of the mall, the ceremonial road that runs from Trafalgar Square to the front gates of Buckingham Palace, sits the Admiralty Citadel, a heavy concrete wartime bunker whose gun position is still visible on its surface. It is a 2-minute walk from the palace gates. It was connected to the wartime tunnel network from the beginning. A short distance along Whitehall is the entrance to the Churchill War Rooms, the underground bunker from which the wartime cabinet operated throughout the Blitz, where Churchill slept on a modest camp bed and made transatlantic telephone calls to Roosevelt from a room the size of a large cupboard. The war rooms are now a museum. The wartime maps are still on the walls. The smoke stains from 1940 are still on the ceilings of some corridors. What connects the Admiralty Citadel to the Churchill War Rooms to the question of what lies beneath the palace is this. The tunnel network that connected these buildings extended, according to multiple sources, including former government personnel, in the direction of the palace. No official documentation of a confirmed connection has ever been made public. The government has not confirmed it exists. Former staff members who claim to know of such a route have described it in consistent terms across multiple accounts. Given that the government went to the considerable expense and engineering effort of building walkable underground routes between buildings along an entire stretch of Whitehall, and given that the palace is a 2-minute walk from the nearest confirmed end of that network, the question of whether it stops at the palace gates or passes beneath them is one the official record declines to answer. One further detail. During the early years of the Cold War, the coal cellar beneath the state apartments of Windsor Castle, the royal family's second official residence, was converted into a nuclear bunker. This conversion is documented and confirmed. It happened in response to the Cuban Missile Crisis of 1962. The existence of a nuclear shelter at Windsor is publicly acknowledged. Whether a corresponding provision exists beneath the palace in London, which is the official working residence of the monarch and the building from which the monarch would be expected to continue to function in a national emergency, is not something the official record addresses. The Churchill War Rooms are a museum. The Admiralty Citadel is a listed building. The tunnels that connected them are documented in the National Archives. What extends from those tunnels toward the palace at the end of the mall has never been confirmed to the public, and almost certainly never will be. On the 24th of July 2015, a television presenter named Kate Garraway walked into the white drawing room of Buckingham Palace as part of a Good Morning Britain segment and paused in front of a large ornate mirror mounted on the wall. The White Drawing Room is one of the most visited staterooms in the palace. It is where the Royal Collection Trust hangs some of its most significant works, where the gold furniture and the Regency-era details that visitors expect from a royal residence are displayed in their most concentrated form. Millions of tourists have stood in that room and looked at that wall. Garraway said to camera, "This is the White Drawing Room. Looks beautiful, doesn't it?" And then she reached out and pulled the mirror toward her. Behind it was a door. Behind the door was a corridor. And the corridor, as the Royal Collection Trust curator Anna Reynolds explained on camera, led directly to the private apartments of the monarch. It is how the sovereign moves between her private residence and the state rooms without walking through all of the intervening spaces. It allows her, as Reynolds put it, to make an entrance, to appear in the room where guests are waiting without having been seen to arrive. The guests are assembled. The monarch walks through the mirror. She is simply there. The passage is not secret in the sense of being unknown to palace staff or to the institution. It is not a hidden mechanism that had been forgotten. It is a deliberate design feature of the palace, built to serve a specific function, and it works exactly as intended. What made it significant in 2015 was simply that it had never been shown on camera before. A feature that had existed for over a century was seen by the British public for the first time because a television presenter decided to pull on a mirror on a Tuesday morning. This is worth staying with for a moment. The White Drawing Room is open to public tours every summer. Hundreds of thousands of people walk through it every year. They stand in front of that wall. They admire the mirrors. They take photographs. And for all but a handful of years in the room's entire history, none of them knew they were looking at a door. The information was not classified. It was simply never offered. There is a difference between secrecy and silence, and Buckingham Palace has, across its history, been very skilled at the second one. The mirror door is the smallest of the four things in this video. A corridor behind a looking glass, a design solution to the specific problem of royal entrances, is not by itself a particularly dramatic revelation, but it is a useful illustration of the broader principle that the world's most famous royal address contains things that are simply not mentioned. Not because they are dangerous to know, but because the institution that manages the building has never considered it anyone else's business to know them. There is no official floor plan in the public domain. There is no registry of the palace's underground features. There is no document that answers the question of what the building is in its entirety, from river to rooftop. The tourists at the gates are looking at the version of the building they have been given. It is not the whole building. In 2020, a team of researchers at Home Advisor, working with architect Jelena Popovich, spent months trying to reconstruct an accurate floor plan of Buckingham Palace using every publicly available source. Aerial photographs, interior images from official tours, information from the Royal Collection Trust website, and whatever architectural drawings had ever been partially released. They produced the most detailed reconstruction of the palace's layout that currently exists in the public domain. They were explicit about its limitations. There were areas of the building they could not map because no information was available about them, and those areas would remain, as they put it, a mystery. The National Archives holds a set of Buckingham Palace floor plans from 1901, over a century old, catalogued under reference work 34-1556. They show the purpose and intended occupants of rooms at the beginning of the 20th century. They are the most detailed official record of the building's layout that any member of the public can currently access. They are 120 years out of date. The palace has been substantially modified, extended, and reconfigured multiple times since they were drawn. What the building actually contains today, in its entirety, is not something the public record can tell you. London is a city that has always built on top of itself, rather than clearing what came before. The Romans built their settlement on the Thames floodplain. The Saxons built their town on the Roman ruins. The Normans built their castles on Saxon foundations. The Tudors built their palaces where Norman buildings stood. The Victorians enclosed the medieval rivers and built their streets above them. The wartime government tunneled beneath the Victorian streets. Each layer pressed down on the ones below it, compressing centuries of decisions into a geology of human choices that runs, in some parts of this city, more than 2,000 years deep. Buckingham Palace sits at the intersection of more of these layers than almost any other address in London. A river older than the Norman conquest flows beneath its foundations. A Victorian brick tunnel carries that river to the Thames. Somewhere in the same general stratum, the wartime tunnel network extends from the confirmed bunkers along Whitehall toward the end of the Mall. The completed tunnels of the Postal Railway stored national art collections during the First World War within the broader network of the same underground system. And in the palace above all of this, a door disguised as a mirror has allowed the British monarch to appear and disappear from her own staterooms for well over a century. None of this appears on any document the public has been shown. The tourists at the gates see the palace. They do not see the building. The river underneath it has been flowing since before anyone thought to build a palace there. It does not care about official floor plans. It just keeps going.